We're at a point right now where you can inflate, you can default, or option number three, find a villain. And those sons of bitches did it to us. It was Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC. How could they do it to us? And bang, when they say we're not taking dollars anymore for oil, thank you. Look, Iran has said that already. Russia has said that. And the United Arab Emirates just said it. They're the seventh largest producer of oil in the world and an OPEC country, just admitted into BRICS. Well, what if all of OPEC says we're not taking it anymore and the dollar gets dumped and those dollars flow home, hitting our shore, creating hyperinflation? Stocks, bonds, real estate, the dollar, the banking system, and the insurance companies all collapse under an interest rate market that goes to the moon to compensate for hyperinflation. You've just reset the system, and you have a villain to blame it on rather than falling on the sword for your brain-dead monetary policy of the Fed and the irresponsible, addicted to spending fiscal policy of the U.S. government.
And good afternoon, everyone. Andy Schectman, CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, with me today. I know y'all had so many comments last time about ask him this, ask him that, get him back on. So here he is, round two. Now, today we're going to preface it a little bit differently because with the Red Sea shipping routes, you start to see there's an alternative route around the Arctic that will be almost 100% controlled by Russia and China. It's called the North Sea route. And the nuclear icebreaker fleets, and now the fifth is being constructed in the St. Petersburg shipyard in Russia. Now, who controls that route is definitely going to control a large lion's share of cargo across the planet in a shorter fashion. So we want to talk about that. Also, Bitcoin overtaking silver market cap globally briefly. And it's just Bitcoin and gold at all-time highs instantaneously in the same days. Yet you walk across the street and ask somebody like, what? I didn't know anything happened. What do you mean? So there's this disconnect between the financial world and Main Street, and the real world is really what everybody's just going about their days are not seeing. So how is this all going to culminate in here as we march forward in the next couple of months, especially here March 11th when the Fed stops emergency lending for banks which are in trouble? And we could point to New York no further, and we already see another one that's going to need money, but they might not get it. So then what happens? So Andy, appreciate you joining me again. We've got a few questions here, and I'm sure a lot of people are interested in the answers.
Yeah, man. Good to be back, David. These are interesting times. It's a Chinese curse, by the way. May you live in interesting times. So it's good to be here, and let's get at it.
Yeah. So what are you hearing about the Arctic century? Because suddenly India is wanting to trade crude for rupees, and they're definitely finding a way around anything Western controlled, all the sea routes. That's the way that the dollar was so strong, was dominating the sea routes, guaranteeing passage of cargo. Well, now they just are going up to the Arctic and they don't need those sea routes anymore. They can cut your costs, get it to you 25% cheaper and save you 7 days on the voyage. So suddenly I'm wondering, is Russia really about what we think it is, or is this a way to stop another competitor entering the market that's going to dominate sea trade?
Well, I think if you look at, for example, take a step back and look at the Belt Road Rail Initiative, which is the largest infrastructure project in human history, which is very closely tied to the BRICS. You're talking bridges, railways, maritime channels, all sorts of trade routes that will be patrolled by only military and commerce. That's the beginning of it. And when you look at the Northern Sea route, which is, I guess you could say it's the framework of this strategic partnership between Russia and China. Connecting with the Belt Road Initiative, it allows ships to not sail around the Cape of Good Hope, 15,000 miles. It allows them to cut right through this corridor that in the summertime, we can do it without the assistance of icebreakers. Of course, in the winter, they're preparing, obviously, this icebreaker fleet to allow safe passage, even in the winter.
Over there, they're just flying by. I can't believe it. No way. Spam call all the way out here while we're shooting on location. Oh, look how many calls we already got today. Oh, that's all spam right there. Missed calls. just like you, sometimes I don't even want to answer the phone anymore because, these kind of calls are continuously rolling in. Very few ways to handle this. Takes you an enormous amount of time. So let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, Aura. Plus these data brokers, and they're consolidating all the information they can find about you. Have you been to Google to look for yourself? They have all these previous places that you work, every previous employers, addresses, phone numbers at times. And then there's Aura, an easy-to-use app that gives you all the tools to keep your identity, your privacy safe online. Aura scans for your personal information that's out on the web, and it does the work of multiple different apps and softwares. And every time you look online, there's some new information that's been scraped about you. I want that all removed. But to do that as an individual, do all the paperwork, that's going to take years. But with Aura, there's just one click and they do the hard lifting for you, because information privacy is becoming a big deal. Click on that link in the description box below, aura.com/adapt2030. Try it 2 weeks free, or click on the QR code left side right there. Get protected. And now on with the video.
But what it really is more of the exact same thing. It is alternatives to the traditional shipping lanes that are patrolled by the U.S. Navy. And a lot of what we see happening with the BRICS is, if you look at the countries that are involved and you look at the infrastructure, it's countries that are very, very natural resource rich, and as well, countries that are strategically aligned or strategically placed with very important shipping lanes. And this is no different. It will be a permission-based system where everyone else has to go around the Cape of Good Hope, which will take, days longer, cost a lot more money. The use of the Northern Sea Route would be cheaper and faster, and just gives also would be free from the United States Navy patrolling those lanes, and will just give a leg up, if you will, in terms of global logistics to those countries that are aligned with the BRICS and aligned with this particular sea route. So yeah, it's something you'll continue to see more of as we see the BRICS grow with scope and size, and I expect to see this happen all over the place, not just in the Northern Sea Route.
If I could add a point onto there, because I've really been fascinated by this once I started to learn about it. So I'll read you just a headline here. Banks paying more attention to NSR, that's the Northern Sea Route, cargo transit. VTB Bank says within 10 years, the total cargo flow in the Northern Sea Route is going to reach 400 million tons. That's a lot for those of you who understand shipping out there. We're talking, 20 tons on a container, but 400 million tons, that's an enormous amount. And then they'll need full infrastructure for that, and insurance, which is also, they're working with Abu Dhabi right now to trying to facilitate some insurance agreement, and also design new cargo, not bulk carrier, but specifically cargo ships to run those sea routes, because obviously things get a little cooler up there than your regular Pacific voyage.
Yeah, I mean, this is the war of economic corridors. I mean, is really what it is. But not only that, when you take a look at the Red Sea, I mean, look at how now the BRICS nations basically have the whole Red Sea covered, and the Straits of Hormuz, with Egypt, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, Saudi Arabia. You have all of these corridors in essence locked down with membership to the BRICS. And so not only do you have the traditional, but you also now have these specific new frameworks that are being designed, which will be permission based. And that's a lot of what this is. What the BRICS is, it's a cooperative grouping of countries that are aligning themselves with commodities, natural resources, and shipping lanes. And what this is the Panama Canal on steroids, in essence, and it will rewrite the way that commerce is done in the Southern Hemisphere. And unfortunately, the United States isn't invited to the party at this time, and these are all done in response to, in my opinion, the Western sanctioning. And you got our brain dead Treasury Secretary flying around the world, just was in Brazil, in Russia's backyard, a member of the BRICS countries, saying we need to not just sanction the Russian assets, but we need to confiscate the 380 billion in Forex reserves and use it to rebuild the Ukraine. That is a line that once crossed, no one in the Southern Hemisphere will ever trust us again. And so what you see happening is the chessboard being put into place, and in a very, very strong way, that once all of these things are in place, whether it be, a growing number of countries which represent a larger swath of human population, a larger swath of global GDP, a larger swath of all of the world's natural resources, and now a larger swath of the strategic shipping lanes that are also being reinvented to really give a leg up to these countries as it pertains to the movement of commodities. And yeah, I think they're doing things in a way that will be very difficult for the West to push back against. This is no different. And there are other corridors that they've made. I believe it's called I want to say the East-West corridor, which is between Iran and India. And again, these are transportation hubs that the West won't be invited to, and the United States Navy won't be patrolling. These are all, when you look at the infrastructure plans, these are plans that are being set up to specifically incentivize commerce to be patrolled by military, and that's it. Military and commerce, and that is it. And the United States is not part of it. When you add this to the Belt Road Initiative, understand that right now the Belt Road Initiative is the largest infrastructure project in human history. It represents already 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP. And you start adding all of these routes in all of these countries, moving their natural resources on it, you end up getting a situation of mass adoption, critical mass, where you end up having a situation that is going to be very, very difficult for the United States and the West to compete with and to push back against.
And it's almost like history is repeating, because these same routes going through Kazakhstan, east to west, is what was considered the Silk Road. And going back, those were some of the largest population centers on the planet of the day, going back 3,500 years to, say, 2,000 years prior. When you go back to those eras, Constantinople all the way through Iran, and there's two different routes, and the ones that went through the southern route through Myanmar and over into Yunnan province, and then that was the southern Silk Road, and the regular northern Silk Road that went through the Tarim Basin and out there through Kashgar and cut through out Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. We are talking old history here that's just repeating itself in terms of the might and the ability for them to procure goods that were needed from one part of the world to another. Now, that in itself was a feat of what you're talking here. They replicated that same feat of engineering and money put in and infrastructure building, even during the Silk Road days. You might think it's a bunch of camels, but they had to have stations every 20 miles or so along the entire route for massive amounts of animals and people, and all that infrastructure that it would take to keep that entire supply chain moving was all done back then. So are we reinventing the same thing again, just in a faster fashion, using fossil fuels versus camels? But it's the same locations on the map again that become vitally important, and that will also grow in financial wealth once again. The desert reclaimed a lot of these places, but it seems that with our technology, we're able to reclaim them back and start using them again as transit points across, like you say, east-west.
Yeah, and I mean, if you use this new shipping lane, you're saving 10 days, roughly 10 days shorter than using the Suez Canal. And I think that this falls right into the Belt Road, right into Russia, right into China's hand. The statement that by Putin that the Suez Canal is not effective anymore is just playing right into it. Yet now you're seeing that the BRICS countries can control the majority of the countries in the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. This is a situation where, this is something that is I think a trend that you will continue to see globally. And all of the countries that are joining, if you look at the 35 countries that have joined on, not just the countries, but you mentioned all of the countries that end in STAN. Well, most of those are in the Eurasian Economic Union. At the same time, you have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. Now, these two organizations, I've been saying for 2 years, are going to join the BRICS. And you have the president of Belarus who just came out and said, we need to have a summit to bring these organizations together into the BRICS. You have a massive growing union of cooperation pushing back against the Western hegemony. And it's something that it's amazing that the people here in the United States have no idea what's happening. But this is a growing chorus of countries that are being aligned very, very strategically. The countries that are being admitted and that have applied all have strategic shipping lanes or massive amounts of natural resources. And I think this is something that I would argue is as important to the United States and the future of the United States as anything the world has ever seen. Because once this is all in place, I believe not only will the United States not be part of these strategic shipping lanes, there's a very high probability that when you add in the Eurasian Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the growing number of countries in the BRICS and the Belt Road Initiative, these are all the same countries with the same ideas and the same agendas and the same unity, if you will. You're talking almost 90% of human population. You're talking the majority of all of the world's commodities and strategic shipping lanes. And then they will issue and accept other forms of currency other than the US dollar. And so when you talk about the methodical chessboard being put into play, they're doing it the right way. They're doing it slowly, and they're putting in the countries and the shipping lanes that are strategic to their interests. This, to me, is as important as anything people will hear, and yet it takes alternative media to talk about this. Most people you talk about will have no idea what the hell we're talking about right now. But yet, if you really take a step back and understand that this is the unwinding, if you will, of 100 years of U.S. dominance, and maybe even more like 500 years of Western dominance, that is now being reclaimed in a manner where these countries in and of themselves would never have had the opportunity to do this, but they're finding strength and unity in numbers in a cooperative fashion. If you look at the way China is going into the old Silk Road countries, into whether it be Africa or South America, they are doing things in a very cooperative manner. They are building railways, they are building bridges, they are building maritime channels, they are building oil refineries and gold and silver mines. They are helping these countries not only pull these resources out of the ground, but helping them transport them in a safe manner and industrialize their countries. This is the difference where the West goes around and does things through coercion and through the SWIFT system, through sanctioning. These countries not only are finding shipping routes that will enable them to be free of the United States Navy interference, but at the exact same time, they're doing it, I believe, will issue a common settlement currency or at least trade in local currencies with the idea of really breaking free of the Western hegemony. And this is something that will grow little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once, we will see a big change. And to me, that big change will be a common settlement currency, most likely pegged to commodities, most likely gold, which was reclassified the world's only other tier one reserve asset in 2019 by the BIS. And ask yourself, why are the central banks the most well-informed traders in the world buying more over the last 3 years than in any time in human history? And this is exactly why I believe that they are, in essence, building a new system. And it's not just currency, but it's relationships and it's transportation channels. And you can see this very clearly. What you're bringing up here is something that I've heard very, very few people. In fact, you might be the only person bring it up. I've talked about it because it fits like a hand in glove with what I've been talking about for 4 years. But very astutely, you are bringing up something that everybody should know about. And I hope this opens up people's eyes to exactly what's happening and how significant it really is. It's not just another way to transport goods. What it is a new system that is emerging that the United States and most of the West will not be part of.
And 2 points there. I'm in Asia right now, and they're selling 1 gram of gold shot. It is what it is. Huang Jin is another term for Huang Jin, like a little bean of gold. The entire population is in on it. They're encouraging kids in high school and those who are graduating and those who just want to put a little bit of money for savings. They're encouraging them to all buy these 1 gram pieces of gold. Now, in the United States, that's not happening, but would it be outside China's realm of possibility to say, no, you have to deliver all the gold off the LME? It's not for the Chinese government, it's for all of our citizens who are really, then it starts, once you involve billions of people that are just even buying grams of gold, And this is really on the ground. Everywhere you go around here, anytime you pass a gold shop, they have these little cute gold piggy banks, for a better term. And they're always in the windows. There's pictures of them, and they encourage you to stop in the gold shop and spend your $100 and get your 1 gram gold. And that's for every single citizen everywhere. And especially just coming through Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year here. That was a very, very popular thing, was getting people the 1 gram gold for their, New Year gift in the hongbao, to be able to give them, something to put aside, versus money, where you might give somebody 3,000 NT, or you could give them 1 gram of gold. Now, a lot of people shifted to giving grams of gold this year, and it is really snowballing in society. Like everywhere you go, people are talking about gold. They want gold. They're feeling it. They're seeing it. They're wearing it. They're touching it. It's in their piggy banks. It's on the streets. It's on store window fronts. Buy it, buy it, buy it. Now, something has definitely shifted over here. They know this is the future, but I don't see that in the U.S. happening at all. Nobody's even aware that the gold price hit an all-time record high. And they're over here just like incredible amounts of gold being sold by the gram to the general populace. There's something in the amount of gold that's just shifted over here too. Wow, this arbitrage, and when you're talking about the Shanghai Gold Exchange moving to arbitrage, there is just thousands of tons moving through into Asia now. It is staggering the amount of gold moving over here.
Yeah, the arbitrage is a big deal. And I, of course, people in the West are probably asleep to that, but seeing the Shanghai Gold Exchange have gold priced anywhere from $60 to $100 higher per ounce than it is in London or in the United States, to see silver priced almost $3 higher, is the beginning of the Chinese turning up the arbitrage spigot, so that the sophisticated traders who would rather make money than anything, don't think of the consequences of it, will purchase the metal on the Western platforms and deliver it to Shanghai. It will never come back. Alistair MacLeod is someone I have a great deal of respect for, and he surmises the Chinese have roughly 5 times the amount of gold that we supposedly have, the 8,360 metric tons or something like that the U.S. has, that hasn't been audited since 1956. We supposedly have more gold than anyone in the world, yet Alistair would say, no, not so fast. The Chinese really don't update their statistics. They don't tell us how much they mine and produce, but he believes that they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 metric tons. I think he said 38,000 last I heard, where the people have as much as 18,000 metric tons, to your point, and the state 20. This is a culture that understands what gold is. And when you look at it from the standpoint of the Western sanctioning, what gold represents is an asset that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. But what I think is really happening also is that these countries understand, they see what's happened to Russia, they see what's happened to Iran, and they look at the West as being hypocritical, that we can go into a country like Iraq 20 years ago under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. Sorry, we didn't find any. We destroyed the country. We toppled the regime. And here we are 20 years later, still occupying their country and sanctioning 14 other banks for having the audacity of trading with Iranian banks to buy liquid natural gas. And so we sanction them. Not only that, we're holding all of their oil revenue, where they're not even allowed to direct it. Last year, the country made $90 billion in oil revenue, asked the U.S. for $1 billion, and we said, not right now. So they said, listen, here's the deal. We're kicking the Western coalition forces out of the country. We're making trading in dollars illegal. If you own a business and you trade in it, you're very likely to end up in prison and your business taken. And there are no more green bills, hundreds or 20s or 50s, in the country of Iraq anymore. They got rid of them as of January 1st. And they formally applied to the BRICS. And so when you look at a situation where we can go around dominating people just by our own ideology, and if they don't acquiesce, well, then we kick them out of the SWIFT system. What you are seeing here is a change where a lot of these countries have bought our bonds as a form of savings, or as a form of the petrodollar deal. They would value oil in dollars. The U.S. would, or Saudi Arabia would, in OPEC, and they would take the excess and put them into treasuries. But it wasn't just the U.S. doing it. All of the countries would buy our treasuries as a form of savings. But what can you do with treasuries when you end up on the wrong side of the Western ideology and you end up getting sanctioned, possibly even confiscated? So what we are seeing, I believe, is a change where countries are no longer accepting what has a very short significance in a historical context, that is another country's debt as an asset, but one that can be weaponized. So what we are seeing is the shedding of traditional assets and the accumulation of gold, which has been considered wealth for 5,000 years through two world wars and German hyperinflation and the Great Depression and every pandemic and all of the things the world's ever thrown at it, but it lacks counterparty risk. And that's really, I think, one of the things that all of these countries are pushing back against. And I think the Chinese understand the playbook. We have a problem in this country, and it's called instant gratification, not quick enough, whereas the Chinese are doing things very methodically, and they are putting their not only their citizens, but their country in a place to do very well by owning gold and shedding U.S. treasuries. And you can see that setting up for another act, if you will, another movement at some point where the world no longer wants to hold U.S. treasuries. The world no longer wants to accept U.S. dollars in settlement for their commodities, and instead are moving to something that, like gold, that doesn't have that counterparty risk or the ability to be sanctioned by the West. So yeah, this is a growing trend, and I think we could learn a lot from the Chinese by accumulating gold as wealth, and they're doing their citizens a big favor. To me, it just is the playbook for where it will ultimately go. And let's not forget, in 2019, the Bank of International Settlements reclassified gold as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset next to U.S. dollars and treasuries. So when you talk about the accumulation and the prodding of their people to buy gold, and the fact that they've bought for 14 straight months in a row, and that they don't sell any, and they accumulate more than anyone, and they produce more than anyone, I will tell you, it is my 100% belief that gold will be tied to a new system. And I think that's why they are promoting it so voraciously. And we could learn a lot from that, as far as I'm concerned, Dave.
Ken, you brought up a point about a lot of the BRICS now that are OPEC nations as well. But I wanted to, jump back to the Arctic century, because I really can't drive home the point of this. This is truly the ace card they're throwing on the table here. The Murmansk Port Arctic program is launching, and not only is this the staging point to then start bringing assets in to stage along the entire coast, because it's so remote right now. They need doctors, they need hospitals, they need everything that we would need, but they're bringing it in piece by piece and just setting up towns, for a better term. And they have these Arctic buggies up there that, or for a better term, they can carry 2 cargo containers, 53 foot, and they just huge, gigantic tires, and they can roll along. And this is the fully along the coast that they're setting all this up right now in Murmansk Port. Also, they've been developing with Russian company, what's that, Schectman, a unique line of cables that are going to be working at 75 degrees Celsius below zero. That would be about 85 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. So, when you're ratcheting things down and working in different kind of environments, most cables might snap under different tension loads because of the cold that would be involved in the brittleness of the metal. But they've overcome that because of the Yamal LNG and the Arctic LNG2 project, which, by the way, the United States, Germany, and all the other countries have just slammed down shut. Now, they were supposed to be exporting Q1 here, their first tankers of LNG, but we're talking numbers here. So since you were talking about, trying to get gas from Iran, they're looking at, just in the yearly production here coming out of Murmansk Port alone, they were looking at 21.6 million tons of hydrocarbons just shipped from that one loading port. Like, the entire infrastructure is moving in any way, shape, or form. So the pincer, like the Russians are famous for in their military operations, they surround you and then they pinch you and they keep moving like that. It's the same thing. They've done it on the North Sea route, and they've done it through the OPEC nations. So the way they're going to start developing hydrocarbon resources in the Arctic, and then have the manpower in the cities that are literally developing like gold rush towns in 1849 here in the Arctic. And there's a full fleet. Everything is so Arctic hardened that entire industries are evolving to develop Arctic gear, Arctic rubber tires that don't work in 80-degree Fahrenheit below zero conditions normally. Like, everything is being Arctic based. And if you think of like, we had to develop the battery economy, think of it on that level. They're developing an Arctic economy where everything works in conditions so cold that everything else shuts down. And this is, when you look at it, staggering, the complexity and the innovation and the investments and the manpower and the plans, that grand dream they have of this thing. It really reshapes the world. Whether you still have access to the Middle East or not, you're going to be getting gas from somewhere else. Probably China's going to take the lion's share of that, I would imagine.
People think that the BRICS is a brand new deal. It's been going on for 17 years, albeit what you are seeing is an acceleration in the infrastructure and in the desire to stand on their own 2 feet. Look, 35 more countries have formally applied right now. And, the meeting, there's 200 meetings between now and the big meeting in October, where all BRICS related in Russia, where we're going to see all sorts of developments. And a lot of them will be centered around things like new shipping corridors and shipping lanes and unions of countries that are on the periphery here that will find safety and strength in numbers, that will break free from the Western hegemony. That's exactly what we are seeing happening. And I'm very fond of the term logarithmic decay, which is kind of like going over a waterfall. But where are we in are we way back upriver? And little by little by little by little, we see the pitch starting to change and bang all at once when there is a critical mass, when there is enough of human population, a large enough swath. And let's not forget, when we talk about all these countries joining together, let's not forget that you have in this union two of the three largest nuclear arsenals on the planet. So you have a military might that is very, very formidable. And so this is a situation that they have been doing it in a very, very smart, methodical fashion that will be very difficult for the West to challenge. So, yeah, I think that this is just another piece of the puzzle. I would expect to see many more things just like this that will be strategic. We had Argentina was admitted. Now they declined when Milei took over, but if you look at what Argentina would have bought, it would have controlled the Straits of Magellan. It was done for that reason. They're not just doing natural resource rich countries. They're also doing those that are strategic in terms of their shipping lanes. And they're thinking of things the right way. When the West finally wakes up and realizes what has happened, it will be impossible to push back against, whether it be in the size, whether it be in their military might, whether it be in their control of natural resources. What we are seeing is a transition, and a transition away from opaque debt instruments into one of transparency, a la blockchain, and commodities like gold, like oil, like things that are needed in order to build a system, not promises and opaque debt instruments, but as Zoltan Pozsar calls it, Bretton Woods 3, where Bretton Woods 1 was when the dollar took over for the pound sterling after World War II. Bretton Woods 2, loosely, when the dollar became the petrodollar in 1973, our promise to the Saudi kingdom, hey, we'll protect you, but for that protection, you'll value oil in dollars. Well, what has Saudi Arabia done other than to join the BRICS, join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, join the New Development Bank, and start selling oil globally in other currencies, namely like the yuan, which, by the way, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This is how countries like Iran have sidestepped U.S. sanctions. They sell their oil to China for yuan and then convert it into gold immediately on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which is what? The world's only other tier one reserve asset. And so when you talk about the workaround, when you talk about the methodical accumulation of gold and trade routes and relationships, this is something that is a game of chess, and we're playing checkers, and the West is completely asleep. Most of the public has no idea what's happening. And I think it's admirable that, that you are bringing up not only what's going on with the BRICS, but intricate things like shipping corridors, which really fit like a hand in glove into their ultimate goal, which is to, I think, challenge and move into a new system that is one of, multipolar, which is one of no longer trading in U.S. dollars, no longer being subservient to the SWIFT system. And they just issued a new BRICS pay system, which will be backed by cryptocurrency or blockchain technology, like the Project M-Bridge, which they developed, Shanghai developed with, I believe, I want to say Singapore and the United Arab Emirates. It's a way for these countries, and they've started doing trade on it, to trade outside the SWIFT system using their central bank digital currencies. And what we've been seeing are all of these countries trading in local currencies, where you see Brazil as an example, the second largest exporter of corn in the world, selling their corn to China for yuan, which they can convert into gold. We're seeing Russia trade with India and Russia in rupee and in ruble, and you're seeing all of these countries trade with one another in local currencies. And instead of putting their reserves into U.S. treasuries, In fact, these countries are all selling them and using gold as their form of savings. And let's just talk about that for 1 second. If we go back to the beginning of 2000, for the last 24 years, the S&P 500 has appreciated by 7% per year. But if you look at what gold has done from start to finish, divide it by 24, it's averaged 7.8% per year. It's outpaced the S&P 500 and roughly tripled the return of the bond market. But it doesn't have the risk of sanctions and coercion and confiscation. So what these countries are doing are shedding treasuries and buying gold instead, which has a much longer track record of being an asset, being savings, where treasuries have a very small historical sample of that, but come with it the ability or the lack of the ability for the West to be able to say, no, we don't like what you're doing. Don't listen to what we're doing. Doesn't matter, but we don't like what you're doing, so you're kicked out. And it's the SWIFT system that allows them to do that. So not only are they building shipping lanes free from U.S. interference, not only are they trading in other currencies and gold free from the West, where 20% of all oil sales last year were done outside the dollar, which is a growing number. But they're also and have also developed a trading platform that will allow them, until they issue a common settlement currency, whenever that is. And the Russian finance minister told us that's coming and that it will be pegged to commodities like gold. But until that, they have developed a system that will allow them to trade with one another free from the SWIFT system. You can see the pieces that are being put into place: trading, shipping, commodities, military. At some point, they flip the switch, and every single country on the planet dumps dollars. They don't need to hold them anymore, because for 50 years, the synthetic demand that has been created for the dollar by having to hold dollars to buy oil globally has given the West this exorbitant privilege. And when you realize that everything that is being done from the north-south corridor to everything that we've just talked about is being done in an effort to push back against that, but you put it all together, and it's a massive, very impressive feat that they've already done. But when the switch gets flipped and the world no longer needs to hold dollars, after all, we signed an executive order to go green. After all, we weaponized the dollar. And after all, the number one economic advisor to the U.S. government, Jared Bernstein, is a man whose whole thesis is to lose the world reserve status because it's a privilege we can no longer afford. So is this too stupid to be stupid, or is it planned? And I think it's planned. There is no other conclusion I can come up with other than to say we have done everything in our power to lose the reserve status. We've done everything in our power to lose the good graces and the trust of our foreign creditors. And then if you look at all of the stupid things we've done economically and financially, not to mention a country that is literally increasing its debt by $1 trillion every 100 days right now. This is a situation that is unattainable. It will not last. And these countries realize that and are doing it the right way. They are building what I believe is critical mass and mass adoption. And by the time they flip the switch, there will be nothing the West can do, because they will control the majority of everything we mentioned: human population, GDP, military might, shipping lanes, everything. And you have to ask yourself, did we do this intentionally? Now, why? Why would we do this? Well, we're a broken, insolvent country, a country that has 150 plus trillion in debt, both funded and unfunded, and only 5 trillion in assets. According to the 2022 balance sheet, the largest asset being student debt of 1.6 trillion, 40% of our assets, of the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're at a point right now where you can inflate, you can default, or option number 3, find a villain. And those sons of bitches did it to us. It was Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC. How could they do it to us? And bang, when they say we're not taking dollars anymore for oil, thank you. Look, Iran has said that already. Russia has said that. And the United Arab Emirates just said it. They're the 7th largest producer of oil in the world and an OPEC country, just admitted into BRICS. Well, what if all of OPEC says we're not taking it anymore, and the dollar gets dumped, and those dollars flow home, hitting our shore, creating hyperinflation? Stocks, bonds, real estate, the dollar, the banking system, and the insurance companies all collapse under an interest rate market that goes to the moon to compensate for hyperinflation. you've just reset the system and you have a villain to blame it on rather than falling on the sword for your brain dead monetary policy of the Fed and the irresponsible, addicted to spending fiscal policy of the US government, and the ability for us to go around the world and in what many would call hypocritical and say, you can use the dollar in the SWIFT system, but you can't because we don't like what you've done. There's no check and counterbalance there. And so, yeah, I think this is the beginning of many more things that we will see over the next several months until we get to October when the big BRICS meeting happens, where we find out which of the 35 countries that have formally applied will be admitted, how much bigger their infrastructure has just gotten. And then, of course, we have the biggest election in the United States history just less than a month after. So, yeah, this is going to be a very, very interesting, thought-provoking, and eventful year, David. And I think we ain't seen nothing yet.
I'll agree with you. It seems that the cycle had run its course and the world unanimously agreed that we were at the end of this debt cycle. I study 400-year cycles in the sun, and it seems that we are heading into a grand solar minimum as we drop off of this solar cycle into the next 2 solar cycles, which would affect global food production. Now, if you take all those things into account, we've run the 80-year cycle of debt, and we're also coming into a more difficult time to provide enough food for the world populace at a reasonable price. But you know they were going to have to double, triple, quadruple their food spending, but at the same time, everything else that we see going on in the economy was going to come home to roost at the same time. It was like the perfect storm of a 400-year cycle overlaying with an 80-year cycle. Normally, they don't overlay that cleanly in that just a decade or so of effect across the entire planet. I don't care what continent you're on. So something to reset. I absolutely agree that the rug's being pulled on purpose to give cover for the reasons that there are food shortages. Oh, it's the shipping lane there shut down. Oh, it's the war over there. Oh, Ukraine, they just took 30 million tons off. Food prices are going to go crazy this year because they were anticipating the Ukrainian conflict to be finished by now. But you're looking at coming into a non-plant season there. If you see the damage and the devastation across all areas where they grow mainly, grain crops in Ukraine, there's going to be a very, very, very limited yield this coming out. And what happens to the African nations that were depending on that 20 million tons of export that they normally do? Well, those aren't there anymore, so they're out bidding up somewhere else. Who really knew about all this cycle? Who on high is looking down that understands the interwovenness of how this would affect society anyway? Because if you look back in the 1640s at the Monroe Minimum, you start to see the same things. There was economic collapse, population migration, and the government had to restructure itself to rule the citizens in a different way. We see nothing more than the same repeating. It is a repeating cycle, but at this time it's a little different. Another food growing area on the planet, if they were to set up Africa and the Sahel, that could be a year-round double rotation crop food growing area that is larger than the United States and Canada combined if they had the investment, if they were able to tap the different aquifers from the Sousse aquifer in Morocco all the way over to the Nubian sandstone aquifer under Egypt, etc. In addition to the above ground water resources that are continuously heavier rainfalls across, you start to see where the New Renaissance Dam filled 5 years earlier with the amount of typhoons. And again, that hydrological, that rain cycle is changing. So if you want to set up a new food grow zone, and that would be a place to do it. And again, you could reissue all the debt and you could start from zero again, and you could run that full 80-year cycle in a different location on the planet. Nothing goes to zero. It's going to collapse one place, but it's going to come up like a spring mushroom in another. So if you look at that, like, okay, well, food's going to be affected and we got all this infrastructure for the Arctic. We need all this other new food infrastructure, set up new grow zones, because we're going to lose a lot of food 45 degrees north latitude and above and 45 south and below. And that you look at the grain crop areas, well, that's China. Well, that's part of Canada. It's part of the United States too. And you start to look at, wait, Australia would be affected. Oh, wait, South Africa would be affected. And then you start to add all these numbers up and you're like, that's a lot of crops that aren't going to be there. And to start to see food prices rising exponentially. And now we're getting into it where the world is being pinched on food prices. And when you look at the amount of extra money it takes to fill the belly that it didn't 5 years ago, people are looking at doubling prices, and then you pull all that money out of the economy and it just never ends. It really won't from this point forward. Food will continue to increase in price, but they need the scapegoat. They need the reason why you're not getting the choices of foods, why your stores aren't supplying the plethora of choices that you used to have. Why shrinkflation? Every time you buy a bag of something, rip it open, there's only a quarter of it full when it used to be full. They can only put so much filler with cellulose in the food. They've run their 28% maximum from the USDA allowable in the human diet. or else you couldn't digest it because you're not a termite. They're at the maximum allowable before humans get sick. At 28% of all these fillers are cellulose. They can't even put a 1% more in there. Like they've run every possible trick they could.
Look at all the fires at the chicken and processing plants, and the fires in Texas that have destroyed cattle, and the farms that are being bought up by the Chinese and by Bill Gates. And when you talk about the potential food disruptions in this country, it becomes very, very frightening. You look at the number of chicken and egg producing facilities that burnt down in the last year and a half, and you have to ask yourself, was this just coincidental or not? And I mean, you're talking, I don't know, 100 or more. It's a situation that's very strange, but I agree. Food production is going to be a very big deal. And if you look at how, if you talk of Africa being a place where a lot of this will shift to, well, look at the cooperative endeavors that are being done in Africa. And a lot of these African countries are signing on to the BRICS and signing on to the Belt Road, and they are being industrialized in a cooperative fashion. And so this is something that is very important for people to understand, that the West is losing its influence. And especially when you add into it things like, food production declining in the West, and the ability for other countries to be able to step in, I guess you could say, that never had the ability to do so before. But that's exactly what these countries are doing, or what China in particular is doing, as they go into Africa and South America and strike these deals and buying up farmland all over the place. So, I mean, China bought the biggest pork producing plant in South Dakota in the United States. So this is a situation, they understand what is coming, and the West is just asleep at the switch. And I think what you are basically seeing is a gradual shift of power from the West to the rest of the world. And this is something that has to be done the right way. And if you take a step back and look at what they are doing it the right way. And that's really the moral of everything we're talking about, as far as I'm concerned, is that this is being done slowly and methodically. It's not just in gold and silver. It's a whole lot more than that. It's not just shipping lanes. It's a whole lot more than that. It's setting up an infrastructure that is completely and totally cooperative, is transparent, and is based upon commodities and shipping routes. And not to mention 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals on the planet. And so it's a situation that we'll wake up one day and we will be minorities not invited to the party, minorities to the new global system that you could argue will have gradually and then all at once changed into a system that really doesn't need the West any longer to not only be the policeman of the world, but to also be the engine of production and growth. That has shifted and gradually to the rest of the world. And now you move into farming and food production and all of those things. And very quickly you have a very formidable challenger that it's too bad that the West isn't part of this, but I think you'll see more and more countries that will choose sides, like France. Macron has already done a 50-point trade deal with China, from 5G technology to military engagement. He bought a very large liquid natural gas deal from the United Arab Emirates and paid with yuan. He asked to go to the BRICS meeting, was turned down in Johannesburg, but you can see sides are being chosen. Mexico is talking about joining the BRICS. You will see a lot of the Western countries join the BRICS. Turkey asked to be part of the European Union, were turned down. They now have formally applied to the BRICS. A lot of the countries that were Western friendly, like the United Arab Emirates, are choosing sides. And I think this is going to be a growing trend. It will be very interesting to see which 35 countries have been formally admitted. And there's another 26 or 7 that have informally applied. This will be something that will increase in speed, and you will find Western countries that will have to choose sides as well, because this is not this is a whole different deal, and a whole different deal that you could argue will be the framework of a new global financial system, a global economic system. And it's scary, Dave. I really do believe that this is a scary time. The old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. These are interesting. And I think over the next several months, we'll get much, much more interesting. And I would love to come back and talk more about this between now and the end of the year, because I think you're going to see things really start to exponentially increase in speed and in development.
Yeah, let me throw you with a last thought here. Yeah, that's funny. Mexico building a wall to keep the Americans out. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah.
But the new Renaissance Dam, everybody would take a look at this because this is now going to be the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa that's going to provide continuous stable power to Ethiopia and Eritrea or Eritrea, however you like to say that, and parts of northern Sudan. So these areas that you
Which, by the way, real quick, not to interrupt you, but Ethiopia, part of BRICS, Sudan formally applied to BRICS. You get Sudan in there, you now have the entire Suez Canal and the Red Sea in the possession of the BRICS. The entire. So again, not really coincidental. Sorry to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, it fits like a glove, as you said. These areas that were some of the poorest on the planet are becoming some of the wealthiest in Africa just because they have continuous electricity, which then boosts into the hygiene. And then, the reason I was trying to finish off with this for the gold here, or sorry, excuse me, for the silver, is, this green agenda was sold to us that we're going to need this, that, and the other, and it's going to continue forever. And 100% of appliances will be green at the end of the transition. But we realized they don't even have a copper to do that. So the anticipated usage of silver was driving some of the price into the green agenda. So in your opinion, do you think, there's the last question here, do you think that the investment of it or the usage of monetary metals will overtake that demand that would have been from the green energy because of the rising prices and the institution of, bringing up a new commodities-based or currency-based gold-backed currency that will, take the demand for silver, which would have let off from the green agenda?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I find it very interesting when you look at, people are probably all asking themselves, why is silver not done what it should? It's an asset that is decreasing in supply. It used to come out of the ground for 5,000 years at a ratio of 16 ounces of silver to every 1 ounce of gold. And here we are today, and the mining ratio or the geologic ratio is 7-to-1. It's found in nature in a form called epithermal, like your skin is epidermis. Epithermal means very near the surface. The big deposits were found years ago. And when you look at the Silver Institute numbers, they'll tell us there was like a 250 million ounce shortfall. 2 years in a row, large shortfalls in the hundreds of millions of ounces. It is now a systemic shortfall. And yet they do not include the military applications in their supply demand figures. Now, I've been saying for years that there's 500 ounces of silver in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile, and I was approached while speaking in Vancouver about 3 months ago from a guy. He comes up to me and says, what I'm going to tell you is declassified, but I'm a consultant for the DoD, and I actually worked on the Patriot missile program. Showed me all sorts of pictures of how they tested it off the Patriot missile off the coast of California on a platform underwater. And he was telling me how, when it was vertical, it was hard for us to figure that out because the guidance system was designed to be shot out of torpedo tubes horizontal, and it doesn't know where it is when it's all sorts of stuff that I didn't need to know. But he said, you're right. There's between 14 and 15 kilograms in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. Now ask yourself, when you talk about the military industrial complex continually fighting wars or supplying munitions to countries, even if we're not in the war, you have a rationale to suppress the price of silver. And ask yourself, why would 4 commercial banks over the last several years have the largest concentrated short position of any commodity ever traded on the COMEX in silver? Why? And I would argue that when you look at these supply demand numbers that say we're 200 to 300 million ounces short of supply versus demand every year in an asset that is decreasing in nature by over half, in an asset where only 30% of the silver that came to the market came from companies that mine silver. The rest of it was by byproduct mining, where companies mine copper or lead or zinc and stumble across some silver. Oh, here you go. Let's sell it to the market. It's decreasing in nature. It's increasing in green and digital applications. But the military application is one that is ignored by the Silver Institute. It is not in their numbers. And yet I have a consultant to the DoD telling me you are 100% correct. But that's just one missile. How about all of the aerospace and missiles and bombs and munitions that are all very high tech, that have copious amounts of silver in them, in the guidance systems and in the propulsion systems and in the stealth fighter and all of these things that need copious amounts of silver? Well, they are mysteriously not counted. And you ask yourself, well, why would they hold down the price of silver? It doesn't make sense. Well, this is exactly why. It funds the military industrial complex. And so, yes, I do believe that not only will gold be part of a new system because it is the only tier one reserve asset other than US dollars that the Bank of International Settlements reclassified in 2019. They're the most sophisticated, well-informed, wealthy bank in the world. They are the central banker's central bank. And that is a big deal. And yes, there is a 90% correlation in movement between gold and silver throughout all of history. And yes, I believe gold will go to levels that the world can't imagine because it will be pegged to a new system, one where it doesn't have to be about trust anymore. Trust us, really. No, it'll be about blockchain showing how much gold is pegged to the system, immutability, and veracity using an asset like gold to pledge to a system, to give a new system veracity. But I think silver is the most undervalued asset on the planet, that it is being suppressed because of the military industrial complex, never-ending wars. And I think that will end poorly because the only way you can suppress a market or manipulate a market over an extended period of time is to push it in the direction that it is going. You have India, who has imported over 400 million ounces of silver in the last 2 years. And you look at the numbers on COMEX, which Ted Butler just got a admission from the COMEX market, from the folks that run the COMEX market, that more or less admitted that JP Morgan and the COMEX have been double counting the silver in the silver ETF and in their registered account or their eligible account. In other words, bottom line is you can say there's well under 200 million ounces on the COMEX, period, of which only 40 million is available for delivery, which is rehypothecated by a factor of almost 1,800%, meaning everyone who has a silver contract stands for delivery. Only 1 out of 18 will get the bars. The rest get cash settled. It is a make-believe price that is being held down by the military industrial complex. And this will end poorly because the world is accumulating it. And you can't hold down that global wave of demand and naked short something where you have the ability to stand for delivery. And that is why you are seeing the systemic bleed down of silver from the COMEX, from the LBMA, and now the $3 premium on the Shanghai Exchange to the Western price, incentivizing the arbitrage. They can keep turning that up little by little by little and bleed down all of the Western supplies over to the East, which will never come back. And yes, so I would say to you that silver to me is the most undervalued asset, period, that I've ever seen. And there's a term called asymmetrical risk reward. And that basically says, what can I own that has the lowest downside risk and the best upside potential? As God is my witness, I don't think I've ever seen anything better than silver. So I don't tell people to buy these things to get wealthy. I tell them they are wealth. You own enough of it, sure, you can be wealthy. But when you look at a commodity like silver, which has been so really manipulated and distorted in its real value, not by the people who are accumulating it like India and China and Russia, but by the West to support their military industrial complex and to make the dollar and the U.S. bond market seem stronger than it is, it will end poorly. And yeah, I think it's something everyone should own, because before it's all said and done, I think it will exert itself. It will find its real value, whether it's dragged along by the price of gold, which will be pegged to a new system, or just breaks free from the shackles of suppression when the rest of the world needs it and is accumulating it for green, for digital, for military, and for monetary aspirations. There's just not enough of it as it's disappearing in nature and increasing in demand to be on the short side of suppressing a commodity that the folks in Canada just petitioned the Canadian government to move from industrial to strategic. It is a strategic metal, and most of the world knows that. The West is just trying to hide that, and again, it will end poorly. So that's what I'm getting at. And a lot of what we've talked about today is understanding, like the LME. You mentioned the LME, the London Metals Exchange. Well, I don't know how many people know, but China bought the LME a few years ago. The LME is a little different than the LBMA. The LME mainly focuses on base metals like copper and steel and tin and whatnot. Well, they're buying all that up too. And now they're actually warehousing the metal in China that is held on the LME. They want to issue Shanghai contracts where price is higher than in the West on the LBMA. So they're going to start arbitraging everything over there, not just the precious metals, but the wheat and the soybeans and the corn and the copper and the lead and the zinc. Everything you need to build an infrastructure, they are methodically doing. And when you talk about silver, yeah, look at the amount that India's imported, and that's just one country, and that's just what they tell us. So when you realize that over 300 million ounces have been bled off the COMEX in the last 2 years, and India alone has imported 400 million ounces, where the hell do you think all that silver is going? It ain't going here. It's going over there. And I would tell people that there are very few things I've seen in 34 years of finance that rival the characteristics of silver right now. To me, it is the most undervalued, underappreciated asset on the planet. And that's all been done by the Western manipulation, not only of price, but also of rhetoric, making silver seem unwanted and unneeded, yet it might be the most integral metal, period, on the planet right now for growth in digital, green, and military operations. So yeah, I don't think there's a better place to put your money, at least a portion of it, into silver right now.
Great closing statement. There's so much opportunity. It's the most opportunity in human history because there's the most wealth on the planet. There's the most people and there's the most opportunity. And again, staying on China, Wei Ji, opportunity and the danger. Where do you find that? There's a fine line, just like you said. May you live in interesting times. Andy Schectman, CEO, Miles Franklin, Precious Metals. Was that an alert I just got? I think that was a crossover on my EMA. I need to take a look. Anyway, Andy, thanks for having thanks for coming on the
brother.
show.
Great to see you, David.
Learned a lot.
I wish you and all your listeners nothing but the best. Interesting times, as you say. I'd love to come back and run shotgun with you again and see where the next few months take us. But I'm always here if you want to jump back on, and appreciate the opportunity and look forward to picking up where we left off real soon.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye, David.